Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Shoshana Abrams. I'm the Senior Manager for the Advocacy Campaigns here at EDF Action. I'm really excited to do this event with you all today. Thank you for gathering. Thank you for signing up. I think we had over 500 people RSVP for this event, so we're really excited to bring you a really relaxed but important conversation on the endangerment finding, EPA's endangerment finding. Before we get started today, a reminder that you can type any questions you have into the comments from wherever you're watching from, be it YouTube or Facebook. We are aiming for a short session today, just 30 minutes of your time to get some good information and some action done with us. We'll have a few minutes for Q&A, and we'll also be sharing some helpful tips for submitting meaningful public comment. EDF, together with Moms Clean Air Force, has already submitted comments from our top scientists, from our legal experts, and from supporters like you. Together with Moms Clean Air Force, over 30,000 of you have submitted public comments on the endangerment finding. That's truly incredible work, record numbers. I want to take a moment to just thank you all for being so engaged on this important issue. And we're really doing this together. We're fighting the good fight together. So I want to have you all join me in welcoming two of my wonderful colleagues, EDF legal and regulatory expert, Peter Zauzow, and Moms Clean Air Force public comment extraordinaire, Sam Schmitz. Peter and Sam, welcome to the conversation. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much, Shoshana. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, this is Coffee and Comments, so I hope you all have your mugs ready at home, and I know Peter and Sam do as well. Just a casual question this morning. What's in your mug to start us off?
I can go first. I've got some green tea that I found in the office, trying to start the day off on a good note.
Excellent. Thanks, Sam.
I've just got my regular cup of coffee here.
Amazing. We here at EDF and Moms Clean Air Force are just like you, starting our day. So let's get started and really jump into the weeds of this. I wanted to pass things over to Sam to give us a little bit of explainer of what the endangerment finding is. It's a pretty wonky thing. I think we've all struggled to try and explain this to people. It's nitty gritty. It's in the weeds of the way EPA functions and scientific classification. So Sam, can you tell us a little bit about how you communicate about the endangerment finding to the moms community? And then we'll move over to Peter to get the real legal analysis.
Yeah, totally. So the endangerment finding is the legal and scientific foundation for EPA's ability to regulate climate emissions. So that means how they're able to protect us and future generations. This is something that they issued way back in 2009 after their own EPA research found that climate pollution does in fact endanger public health and future generations because of the way that it heats the planet. So this has been in place for a really long time, and there's a lot at stake in terms of the EPA's ability to do their job. Their mission is to protect human health and the environment, and this effort to rescind the endangerment finding would fundamentally impair that. So, you know, the biggest implications will be for future generations like mine, Gen Z, our kids, and their ability to have a safe and stable planet in the future. And we just need to be able to depend on EPA to do their job and protect us.
Thanks so much, Sam. Peter, what do you have to add to that description? And how is it that the administration is able to challenge settled science like this?
Well, thanks, Shoshana. And Sam's description was really great. And I think the short answer to your second question is we don't think they can, consistent with the law or the science. And so it's important, I think, here to underscore that what this administration has done is issue a proposed rule. So it's not yet final. It's out for public comment. And the proposal is really flatly inconsistent with EPA's legal obligations under the Clean Air Act. The Supreme Court has determined that greenhouse gases are air pollutants, and that EPA must regulate them if it makes a science-based finding that they harm human health and the environment, and EPA has done that. That's been upheld by numerous courts over the last 15 years. And it's based on record evidence, scientific evidence that's just overwhelming in terms of the harms and the impacts that climate pollution is having on people across the country. And so, in light of both of those features, we don't think that there's, any basis or in law for the administration to move forward with this really damaging action.
Thanks so much, Peter. Can you say a little bit while we're on this subject about the real impacts if this moves forward on EPA's ability to protect people and the environment?
Absolutely. And as Sam alluded to, they're enormous. I mean, this rescinding this action, if the administration is successful in doing it, will mean dramatically more climate and health harming pollution. Will mean higher costs for people across the country, and it'll mean more harms. And so you want to kind of talk about each of those a little bit. This action that we're talking about here repeals the science-based endangerment finding. And it also, as part of the action, repeals all greenhouse gas emission standards for motor vehicles that EPA has ever adopted for light-duty vehicles like our passenger cars and trucks, and medium and heavy-duty vehicles like freight trucks and buses. So, those standards have been in place since 2010 and have been sort of sequentially strengthened, and this proposed action would get rid of all of that. So what does that mean? It means at least 10 billion tons of additional climate destabilizing pollution over time. That's more than twice the amount that the US emitted last year. It means more health harming pollution that will be responsible for an additional 12,000 premature deaths over time. It means higher costs. And so, we know when we have these common sense climate protections in place, they help to save people money. Repealing them will increase costs on families across the country. And that's borne out in EPA's own analysis as part of the proposal. So we see up to $350 billion more cost for Americans. That's largely in the form of, forcing Americans to spend more money on gasoline. And the administration's own analysis also shows that gasoline will be more expensive. So increasing prices by a quarter in 2035 and about 75 cents in 2055. So really kind of deeply damaging across the board. And it's important to underscore, those are the impacts of this specific action in repealing standards for motor vehicles. The intention here is to eliminate EPA's ability to reduce climate pollution more broadly. And that, of course, will have even more far-reaching and damaging consequences.
Yeah, it's a really dire story that we're telling here. Thank you for kind of giving us the real numbers here. Sam, you work with people across the country in your work with Moms Clean Air Force. Can you tell a little bit about the impacts, like the stories that you're hearing about, the stories that your community is telling about endangerment finding and how this will become real for people?
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. It's hard to always imagine exactly what this is going to look like, but I think there's a lot of people that are telling their story in really powerful ways, and looking forward to helping all of you tell your story as well. But the impacts are going to be really vast. Climate change is already happening. There's catastrophes happening regularly in terms of extreme weather, and it's getting worse. And we need to make sure that it doesn't continue to get worse, and that EPA maintains their ability to handle this problem. But the ones that stuck out to me are from a couple of weeks ago at the endangerment finding hearing that the EPA held, where people could recite oral testimony. So some folks that we work with, there's Kendra from Michigan. She's a nurse. She talked about how, she sees people dealing with asthma, and air pollution worsening is going to cause more cases of asthma. It's going to cause more asthma attacks in kids. And also extreme weather causes power outages. And when you have power outages, something not everyone always thinks about is that this really impacts medical equipment for people. So things like home oxygen systems and CPAP machines for sleep apnea, refrigeration for insulin, that causes real medical emergencies for families if we allow extreme weather to keep getting worse. Another one is Shayna in Denver. She's a Navajo mother of 4, and she lives just a few miles from multiple industrial sites that affect the air quality that they currently have. And so, this deregulation agenda would impact her and her kids really, really quickly, because they're struggling with respiratory issues, and they already live in a place that gets a lot of wildfires, and drought is worsening there as well. You hear stories too of people that have contracted Lyme disease. Tick-borne illnesses are becoming more and more common, unfortunately, because of the way that ticks are migrating and their population is expanding because of different weather patterns caused by climate change. And the most impactful one I have to say is from Hazel. Hazel Chandler. She worked at Moms Clean Air Force for many years and has been advocating for climate action for her whole life. She testified at EPA's hearing from hospice. And the reason that she's in hospice is because she has cancer and really severe respiratory issues. And she grew up and lived near major highways throughout her life. So the air pollution that she was breathing did real damage to her body. And basically her words for EPA were that, she's going to keep fighting until she can't possibly fight anymore, and that it's their job to protect her kids and her grandkids, and now even her great grandkids. So, the stories that people are telling are really important. And it was great to see how many people showed up to that hearing to support keeping the endangerment finding intact. And it's really important that we all continue to do that with a couple of weeks left in the public comment period.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for sharing those stories and for the organizing that Moms is doing to tell those stories and to help get those stories out there. Obviously, all of us here are climate champions. I think that's why we have the wonderful EDF and Moms activists and advocates here on the line. Question for both you, Peter and Sam. If you're talking to someone who wasn't a lifelong climate activist, someone in a different community, what are your arguments that you would give for why folks should care about this or how to activate them? I know, Peter, you gave some stats on the economics and how this might impact folks going forward. Are there other arguments that you all would put out there that would help our network engage their own communities on this issue?
Thanks, Shoshana. I can start with a few and would love Sam's additional thoughts. I think, you're right. There's obviously the really, serious harms we're all experiencing due to climate change and the urgent need to address them. There's also, with all of these clean solutions, with many of them, they cut harmful air pollution as well. And so, we know that they protect public health, from those pollutants in addition to the climate benefits. We also know clean solutions are cheap solutions, and they help to save people money and to really promote affordability. And so some of what I described earlier relates specifically to vehicles. We know clean cars help to save consumers money. When EPA adopted standards for clean vehicles in 2024, they estimated that a new clean vehicle would save consumers $6,000 in avoided fuel and maintenance costs over the life of the vehicle. So we know that there's economic savings there as well. That's true for clean energy. Clean energy is some of the cheapest forms of energy we have, and so really preserving a rational, predictable, stable framework to reduce pollution and advance clean solutions, I think benefits us all economically. And the final thing I'd say is, we're in a world, an increasingly globally competitive world, where we're seeing other countries make investments in these clean solutions. We have been doing that here in the U.S. as well, and that's been just a huge boost to the economy, to jobs. We have over 200,000 jobs in clean vehicle manufacturing, for instance, that are supported and consistent with these standards. And so they really help to benefit Americans and communities across the country who are part of that manufacturing renaissance.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I'll throw another big economic statistic in there that last year the US had 27 climate disasters that caused over $1 billion in damage each. So, as extreme weather and climate disasters become more and more common, Americans can't afford to deal with them. 57% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and we just can't afford to let this continue. Similarly, today's children, that's what we talk a lot about as a community of parents and caregivers. Today's children are expected to face 3 times more climate disasters than their grandparents. So they're going to be having to deal even more with not just the economic impacts of that, but the emotional and the mental health impacts of that, and the displacement of those. But I think another thing that stands out to me is that this is also about science and about democracy. Americans overwhelmingly believe that climate change is happening, it's impacting them, they're seeing extreme weather in real time, and they expect their government to protect us. We saw 97% of the oral testimonies a few weeks ago at EPA fighting to save the endangerment finding. So, again, people are on the same side, very generally speaking. And the EPA needs to listen to the people that they're supposed to be protecting and supposed to be representing. And they also need to listen to the science, which there's been consensus for decades at this point. So yeah, there's lots of different arguments to be made, even just beyond those around climate or air pollution, but it certainly will have really vast economic impacts, and same with just the precedent that this sets for the way that our government represents us.
Great. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. I know EDF also has a blog on some of the economic impacts. I think we could maybe put that in the chat. So you can see that all in writing, the stats that our folks were giving today. I have one last prepared question, which is a little bit of a tough one, I think. All of our comments are being submitted to the Trump administration, and I myself am somewhat skeptical that that administration is going to listen to us, given what we know about it so far. Can you say a little bit about why we're bothering to do this? What the point of getting strong public comments are? What we're trying to accomplish and what success looks like, and then maybe even a little bit more about like some of the legal pieces that I know your team is working on.
Thanks, Shoshana. I can start with that, and Sam, please add more. So yeah, we are all in the process of submitting our public comments, and I think it's important to underscore that EPA has a legal obligation to consider those comments when it's making its decision. And it also has an obligation to, ground whatever decision it makes in the law and in the facts. And we think it's simply not possible, to take a final action that would rescind the endangerment finding consistent with the law or consistent with the science. But it's really important, for us and for people to make clear, the impacts that this proposal will have and the harms it will cause as part of that process. And I think more broadly, just important, certainly for us, and encourage others to make clear the harms that this proposal will have, just as the to elevate the public's understanding of what the administration is doing here and why it will cause such harm to people across the country.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and take a little bit of a different angle too, but I think the public pressure that we can create is really important. And Moms Clean Air Force does a lot of work on, getting people's stories out into the media so that other folks are reading about it, so that people know what the endangerment finding is, so that it's a topic coming up at the dinner table. Because public pressure works on politicians when they're worried about re-election, when they're worried about what their constituents are saying, what the media is saying. So anything that we can do to elevate our stories and get them publicly in the docket, in the media, is really important for making sure that people understand what's happening and that they're really feeling the pressure of the actions that they're taking.
Great. Thanks so much to you both. I've reached the end of my questions here. I really appreciate you both for your thoughtful responses this morning and for the conciseness and the call to action here. I heard a lot of excitement and passion for taking action on this call. So we are now open for questions from our audience here. We're going to start with a question about legal tools. So Peter, can you talk a little bit about what legal tools EDF is using to push back against this proposal?
Yeah, so I mean, part of I think the answer to that question is what we've been talking about. We're in the middle of a process that's required under the law to, for EPA and for the administration to seek and consider comments on this proposal. In addition, we'll highlight that one of the bases that EPA identified as supporting this proposal was a report that the Department of Energy put out on the same day as EPA published its proposal, that was authored by 5 known climate skeptics questioning the science underpinning climate change. And the report was compiled in secret, prepared in secret, did not go through reviews, was not subject to the required public process and scrutiny under federal law. And so EDF has filed a lawsuit challenging that action to try to bring the kind of required public transparency and process that should have occurred there to light. So that's one thing that we've already done as we're kind of moving through the process on the endangerment finding itself.
Thanks, Peter. A question from Miriam. Does the EPA have a mandate to listen to the people and or the science?
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's EPA has to ground its decisions in its legal obligations, and those here are clear. EPA is charged with protecting public health and the environment. As we were talking about earlier, the Supreme Court and other courts have determined that have upheld the endangerment finding against challenges, and EPA has obligations to ground its actions in science and data, and that's clear here too. So we do think what EPA is proposing to do now and rescinding this really foundational finding is unlawful.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Miriam, for your question. And then one last question from Lucinda. Are there any mechanisms for EPA's accountability? The attitude of "so sue me" is rampant.
Yeah, so I think building from Sam's response earlier, part of this is engaging in this process in a way that we've been talking about around what these legal tools are, but also more broadly, engaging in the public conversation around like why this action, what it means for people, what it means for all of us, why it's so damaging, and to shine light on what the administration is doing, in an effort to make clear how harmful it is and to get them to reverse course.
Great. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Sam. We're going to move on to our action part of the call. I want to thank you all so much for your comments and questions and your engagement on this issue. So I'm going to turn things over to Sam so that she can provide some expert advice on how to craft a meaningful public comment.
Thanks, Shoshana. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so again, Mom's Clean Air Force, and I know EDF as well, has taught tons and tons of people how to make their voice heard at EPA. So we've got it a little bit down to a science here. Basically, we have this template for you all. how to write your public comments. So think about it in 4 parts of you have an introduction with the clear ask not to rescind the endangerment finding. So you want to say who you are, what state you're from, because your elected officials care who's speaking up. So saying where you're from is important. And if you identify as a parent, a caregiver, an advocate, that sort of thing, you can share that in your introduction as well. But the main part of it is talking about the climate impacts that you've experienced. So has your family experienced flooding, extreme heat, hurricanes, drought, wildfires, just mental health harms and eco-anxiety? Pretty much everyone has experienced one of those things at this point in time. A lot of times when I'm thinking about my own story, I'll think about, I have asthma, and that has had really dire harms to my whole family. We've spent nights in the ER. It's cost tons in medical bills. So talking about that in relation to air pollution and climate change, or talking about the fact that my mom lives in a wildfire zone. So think about how this affects you, your family, your community, and you want to tell that story and make sure that you're trying to persuade them to care, basically, right? So what is the most compelling way for you to tell them to care? And then you want to incorporate the facts as well. So, it's great and really important to share your story, but you want to make sure that that's backed up by statistics about extreme weather. How many extreme weather events have happened in your community? How much more frequent are they becoming because of climate change? You can just Google these things and find some good facts. Make sure that you're citing your sources when you're submitting your public comments so that they have, that additional legitimacy. But you can talk about the health harms of climate change. You can talk about the history of the courts upholding the endangerment finding and how, this has been challenged before and it's totally illegitimate for it to be challenged again. And then you conclude your statement by just saying, again, please do not rescind the endangerment finding. And instead, you should continue doing your job of protecting public health and the environment. So just try to think about it in those 4 parts. You can write as long or as short as you would like and are comfortable with. This is on the public docket, so it is available online. So just, don't share any information that you wouldn't want out there. But this is a really, really important way for all of us to make our voices heard and make sure that we're on the right side of history. So that's our template. Hopefully that is helpful. We will share the link to the docket either in the chat or after this so that you can make sure you go submit that. The deadline for submitting a public comment is September 22nd. So you've got 12 days, write as much as you want or as little as you want, whatever you have time for. But the more people that are speaking out, the better. I'll turn it back to you, Shoshana.
Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate that. We will be following up with a one-pager on this. So if you haven't gotten these written down, that's totally okay. I would also say that writing a personalized, meaningful comment is really important. We and all kinds of advocacy organizations have tools where we write in a draft comment for you, and you can just submit that. But taking the time to personalize the story, to talk about your community, to link to facts and figures that are meaningful to you really does make a difference in how those comments are received. So I would encourage you, anytime you receive an alert from any of our advocacy organizations, to take a moment to really personalize it. It makes a difference. So we have those links there in the chat. I would also say to visit EDF's landing page on endangerment finding. You'll find tons of those facts and figures. So if you're not sure about what types of AI results you're going to get on a Google search, take some time to look at our webpage and pull some facts from there for your comments. I want to thank you all for joining us. With all of those tips in mind, now it's your chance to submit your public comment. If you've already submitted comments, which I think most of you have probably already done at this point, take a moment to write down names of 5 friends that you think should take action. And after we hang up today, send them a quick email, give them a recording for this and the link, and encourage them to make their voices heard on this important issue. I want to thank you all again so much for being steadfast partners to EDF Action, for your commitment to people and planet, and for joining us today. Take great care, and thank you for your advocacy. And thanks, Sam and Peter. Wonderful job.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Take care. Bye-bye.